I never planned to make it personal. The channel was meant to be entertainment, urban decay, haunted myths, creepy places, a place where I could throw myself into ruins and come back with just enough fear to satisfy the internet. And if I'm honest, to quiet something inside me too. The part that kept scratching at the walls of my chest since I was 8, since she disappeared. I'm Lisa Nguyen, 25 years old, Vietnamese American, born in Philadelphia, raised by silence. My mother vanished 17 years ago, and no one, not the police, not my neighbors, not even my father, ever figured out what happened to her. There were no screams in the night, no bloody trail. One day she tucked me into bed, brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, and whispered,
"If one day I disappear, you must find me, where no one dares to go."
Then, nothing. The next morning I was alone. The apartment felt hollow, like someone had scooped out all the warmth and left only walls and shadows. My father never spoke about her again. It was as if she'd never existed. But I remembered her. The way she'd stare too long into mirrors, the things she'd whisper in Vietnamese that didn't make sense. Koe dang cha, or Dung tin ying ji con yin thay. And the way she'd go still when it rained, like something in the water made her bones hum. That stillness, I carry it now. I didn't become a paranormal explorer to find ghosts. I became one to find her. The letter arrived on my 25th birthday. No stamp, no return address, just my name, Lisa, in handwriting that looked like it had been carved into the envelope rather than written. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, faded. The kind of photo you find in archives behind asbestos and rat droppings. It showed a hospital hallway, cracked tiles, exposed pipes, the kind of place where the dead don't need permission to linger. And at the end of the hall, barely visible, stood a woman. Her face had been smudged out violently, like someone took their thumb to her soul. Scrawled on the back, 3rd floor, hallway 11, 3 a.m. Pennhurst, my breath caught, Pennhurst. I'd seen the name before, in a dusty file hidden inside a box marked closed cases, in the back room of an old clinic I once filmed in. Nguyen Thi Anh, my mother's name. Patient 2711, committed. Episodes of extreme emotional instability, the file said. Disturbances of empathy. Highly sensitive to mirror-induced dissociation. She was there, and now something wanted me to return. 3 days later, Daniel and I were standing at the tree line, staring at what was left of the Pennhurst State School and Hospital. It rose out of the forest like a corpse half buried in the earth. Ivy choked the brick. Windows gaped like broken teeth. A silence hung over the place. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that feels like a held breath right before something screams. Daniel adjusted his camera rig and gave me that sideways look he always did when he thought I was losing it.
"You sure about this?"
He asked me. "No," I said, "but I'm going in anyway."
He didn't argue. That was something I loved and feared about Daniel. He followed me even when he shouldn't. Loyal to a fault. I didn't deserve it. The stench hit us as soon as we pushed through the rusted back door. Mold, wet insulation, mouse droppings, and something faintly metallic, blood long dried into the walls. We switched on our headlamps. The beam caught layers of decay, peeling wallpaper, rusted bed frames, gurneys left mid-roll. The shadows clung to the corners like they were afraid to be seen. In one of the exam rooms, I found it. A file. Hidden behind the warped backing of a broken medicine cabinet, sealed in plastic, like someone had tried to protect it from time. It slid out easily, like it had been waiting. The first line stopped my heart.
Patient 2711, Nguyen Thi Anh. Abnormal brain activity, capable of triggering emotional responses in others.
My mother, my blood. I sat on the floor, not caring that it was damp with mildew, the file trembling in my hands. Daniel crouched beside me, saying my name quietly, but I couldn't answer. Something inside me had just shifted, something deep, something old. The 3rd floor wasn't supposed to exist. Every blueprint I pulled said the building had 10 hallways per floor. But at the end of the 10th, past a collapsed ceiling and a half-melted fire alarm, we found it. A crack in the wall, too even, too purposeful. I touched it. The wall moved. A metal door hissed open, groaning as if it hadn't been touched in decades. Etched into its surface were words almost worn away. Hallway 11, Special Experimentation Ward. I hesitated. Just for a second. Then I stepped inside. The air changed. It was thicker here, filled with static and dust that clung to my skin like invisible insects. The hallway was lined with observation rooms, glass-walled, each containing the wreckage of experiments long abandoned. Restraint chairs bolted to the ground, EEG machines cracked open like eggs, brain charts with red circles drawn around the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and then a voice, soft, not echoing in the air but inside my ear.
They tried to turn her into a weapon, but her blood wouldn't obey.
I spun. Nothing, but something was here. Watching, waiting. The screen crackled to life as we stepped inside the surveillance room. It was the only one that worked. Dust blanketed the monitors like a second skin, but the middle one flickered, showing a live feed. A hallway, our hallway. Same cracked walls, same smeared tiles. But something moved. A pale blur passed by the lens. I turned. The corridor outside was empty. Still, I could feel it. Something was watching us. Not through cameras, not even through eyes, but through space itself. The air pulsed like lungs exhaling just behind my ear. Further down the hallway, I found a massive wall mirror mounted like a window to somewhere else. The glass was cracked but intact. I stepped closer. My reflection shimmered, then chilled, because it wasn't me. It was her. My mother, gaunt, hollow-eyed. Her face was thinner than I remembered, her hospital gown hanging loose on her frame like it belonged to someone else. She raised her hand and touched the glass, exactly where I had. Her movements were slow, mirrored. And then the image shattered, just like that, like it had never been there. A loudspeaker crackled to life above us.
Room 11 unlocked. Preparing trial sequence.
The sound of those words turned my bones to water. Daniel grabbed my arm.
Lisa, we gotta get out of here.
But I couldn't move. I felt something awaken, like a pulse behind my ribs, a low hum in my blood, vibrating through marrow and memory. We didn't speak as we followed the signs. There weren't any, not really, just faint arrows carved into the wall beneath flaking paint. They led to a room labeled with a plaque barely legible under rust. Records room, archives. Charred files littered the floor, burned pages, melted clips, but one corner remained intact. A figure stood there, waiting like he had always been there, hidden in the shadows. He was thin, almost hollow. His hair hung like wet string across his face. His arms were bare, the skin a patchwork of scars, all crisscrossed in deliberate patterns like he had been stitched together and kept apart by willpower alone. But his eyes were silver.
I knew you'd come,
He whispered. I froze.
Who are you?
He smiled, barely.
My name is Edgar.
He didn't move toward me, didn't threaten, he just watched. And then, after a silence so long I thought he had died standing, he said,
Daughter of 2711.
My throat tightened, then he said,
She wasn't insane. She was the result, the apex. And you're her legacy. You came because blood remembers, because she called you.
I shook my head.
No, she was sick.
No, she was the only success.
According to Edgar, the real name of this place, deep under its skin, wasn't Pennhurst. It was MK Pennhurst, a continuation of MK Ultra, a secret arm of experimental psychology blended with fringe metaphysics. They weren't just looking to control minds. They were trying to manipulate empathy, amplify it, twist it, use it as a weapon. They called it emotive resonance manipulation. My mother was their only viable test subject. Patient 2711. She didn't just feel emotions, she radiated them, projected them, twisted them. She could force others to feel pain, joy, fear, at will. It was uncontrollable. And so, they locked her up. And me, I was born in the aftermath. 3 a.m. The time burned into the back of the photo. The corridor trembled. Not violently, but deeply, like a sound you couldn't hear, only feel. A hum that rattled the teeth behind your eyes. Doors creaked open by themselves. Lights above us snapped and flickered. Cold air spilled from nowhere. Daniel stumbled forward, clutching his temples. He gasped.
Lisa, you're inside.
His voice fractured. Something inside him shifted. His pupils shrank. Veins darkened and bulged across his forehead. He looked at me and didn't see me. He saw something else. I stepped back. My own hands were shaking. My chest was warm, too warm, like something was pulsing inside me, radiating outward. I was affecting him, without touching him, without trying. I was doing it. I backed into the wall. My lungs refused to fill properly. My eyes burned. I saw the mirror again in my mind. Saw her, me, smiling through the glass.
Daniel,
I cried, but he didn't hear me. Or maybe he did, and couldn't respond. His body twitched like a puppet pulled in 2 directions. Then he fell. I didn't know if he was unconscious or trapped, and I didn't know what I had just become. They strapped me to the chair in room 11. I don't remember walking. I don't remember the transition. I was just there. Metal under my back. Cold. My wrists held by leather restraints that smelled like old electricity and fear. The room pulsed with red light. A 2-way mirror stood in front of me, but what I saw was not me. It was her, and she was smiling. The kind of smile that doesn't need teeth. Wide, wrong, like someone had drawn lips on a mask and expected you to believe it could speak. Her voice whispered in my head,
you are me, and I am you.
It wasn't a suggestion. It was a fact. The air filled with whispers, some in English, some in Vietnamese, some in languages I didn't recognize but understood. Each sentence overlapped, layered like sediment, pressing against my sanity. My chest throbbed, my head fractured. And then, light. Daniel burst through the door like thunder. He rushed to my side, pulled out something from his jacket. It glittered, my mother's jade pendant. He shoved it into my hand. Lisa, he said, eyes wide with fear and love.
You're still in there. They don't get to take you.
The moment the jade touched my skin, the air shifted. The whispers thinned. The mirror stopped smiling. I could breathe again. For the first time in what felt like years, the walls began to scream. They didn't crumble. They wailed. Not in any human way. More like the building was alive and dying at the same time. Paint peeled in reverse, faces pushed through the wallpaper. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Wide eyes, gaping mouths, patients, victims, test subjects. They cried, they screamed, they sang, and then they exploded into white light. I stood, the leather restraints unbuckled without a sound. My body moved on instinct. I looked at the mirror one last time.
I am not her, I whispered. I am not what you made me to be.
Something inside me snapped, not broke. The red lights shattered, sirens roared. The entire hallway buckled under its own weight. Daniel grabbed my arm.
Lisa, run!
We ran, past flickering machines, groaning walls, sparks flying from loose wires. The air howled. The building collapsed behind us, screaming, begging, breaking. We reached the threshold. The main door slammed shut behind us. Pennhurst was sealed, but not silent. Never silent. They said we were lucky to make it out alive, that the building had collapsed from age, decay, time, that no one was inside when it fell, that there was no sign of illegal experiments, no living patients, no records, just a pile of bricks, steel, and the long, wet silence of the forest reclaiming its secrets. But they were wrong, because I brought something with me, and I think it's still watching through my eyes. We didn't speak much in the days that followed. Daniel kept trying to smile, pretending that we were just shaken, that things would go back to normal, eventually. He'd make coffee and sit by the window, waiting for me to eat. But I never did. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't tired. I wasn't even sure I was real. It started small. The mirror in our bathroom fogged over, even when no one used the shower. A dark shadow would cross the hallway when Daniel wasn't home. My phone vibrated at 3 a.m. exactly, but no message appeared. The jade pendant burned cold against my chest, like ice lodged in my heart. I tried to ignore it. I filmed again, edited videos, responded to emails, but none of it mattered. I kept returning to the mirror. Sometimes she wasn't there, but sometimes I was, smiling, watching, waiting. The first time I lost time, I blamed exhaustion. It was daylight. I was in the kitchen, boiling water for tea. The kettle screeched, and then it was night. Daniel found me in the hallway, staring at my reflection in the window glass, murmuring something in Vietnamese I didn't understand. He said I kept repeating,
She's still behind the glass.
I didn't remember saying it. The next time, it was worse. I woke up in the bathtub, fully clothed, Water overflowing. My fingers were pruned and blood was trickling from my nose. I had scratches on my arms, not deep, but deliberate, almost symmetrical. The mirror above the sink had something written in the condensation. "You let her in," I screamed. Daniel broke the door down, but by then, the words were gone. I started recording myself, not for the channel, for proof. To see what I couldn't remember. One night I left the camera running in the bedroom. At 2:54 a.m., I watched myself sit up in bed. My eyes still closed, I turned my head facing the mirror across the room. I stood, walked to it, and began to speak to my reflection. Not like a sleepwalker, like I was in a conversation, pausing, nodding, smiling. At 3 a.m., the screen glitched. When the feed resumed, I was back in bed, but my eyes were open. Daniel wanted me to leave the city, to take a break, get help. He said I was unraveling. He didn't say it with cruelty. He said it like someone watching the person they love drift out into the ocean, unable to swim after them. And I knew he was right. But part of me didn't want to leave. Part of me thought,
If I disappear again, at least I'll be closer to her.
I drove north to the mountains, to the edges of the state, where cell towers failed and roads turned into gravel, then mud. I found a fire watch station, abandoned since 1997, listed on a conspiracy blog I used to mock. I packed light, one camera, a notepad, water, cans of food, the pendant, and the mirror. The station sat atop a narrow peak overlooking the tree line like a lone tooth in a crooked smile. It was musty, wooden, held together by rusted nails and stubbornness, but it had a bed, a desk, and no neighbors. I locked the door behind me and placed the mirror on the wall across the room. Day 1, I wrote, "I am alone. That means she isn't real. I will prove it." By day 3, I had stopped writing. She speaks to me now, not in dreams, not in mirrors, in thought, in pulse. When I blink, she finishes the thought I began. When I sleep, I wake up standing. When I eat, I taste what she tastes, metal, salt, wet bone. She says things I don't understand, but I feel them anyway. She tells me things about my mother, that she never left, that I was never really born, that I'm what's left when the experiment doesn't fail, but waits. The woods outside the station are wrong. They don't move when the wind does. The shadows stretch too long, and at night the trees whisper like they're remembering something painful. I found a trail behind the tower that led to a burned-out cabin. Inside was a mattress, half rotted. Underneath it, 2 VHS tapes, unmarked, and a black notebook. The cover read, M. Alice. I recognized the name, Mark Alice, a ranger who went missing in 1995. The pages were frantic, torn at the edges, ink bleeding from rain and sweat.
She watches from the tree line. She waits for 3 a.m. Do not look into the mirror. You are not who you think you are.
He had drawn her, a woman, but not quite, her limbs too long, eyes too round, mouth too wide, and inside the mouth, instead of teeth, reflections. I watch the tapes. In one, a man sits in the station where I now sit. He speaks to the camera, lips trembling.
She came to me in the mirror first, then in my thoughts, then in my hands.
In the second tape, he is no longer speaking. He is digging, in the snow, digging a grave, laughing. At the end, he whispers, "You're next." The screen cuts to static. I burned the tapes, but when I returned inside, they were on the table, still warm, still humming. I don't know how long I've been here. Days blur. I find myself staring at the mirror for hours. Sometimes I catch her blinking when I don't. Other times she moves when I'm still. Sometimes I think I'm the reflection, and she's the real one. Daniel calls sometimes. I don't answer. I can't. I'm afraid he'll hear her in my voice. I'm afraid she'll answer first. I've begun carving into the walls. Not words, symbols, spirals, eyes. I don't remember doing it, but when I wake up, they're fresh, still bleeding wood. I see my mother now in dreams, or maybe memories. I see her being strapped down. I see the mirror placed in front of her. I see me being held up as a baby, reflected in her eyes, and behind her, doctors in black coats whispering, "She passed it down." I don't think I'm alone anymore, not just because of her, because I hear footsteps beneath the tower. I hear someone breathing just outside the wall, and I found a photo on my nightstand of me, sleeping, taken from above. There's one more thing. When I stare at the pendant, the jade one Daniel gave back to me, I see her face reflected in the stone. Not mine, her. She's smiling again, and I think this time she's waiting to come out. Not literally, not at first, but I started noticing the way the wood panels of the Firewatch Tower pulsed ever so slightly, in and out, as if the place itself had lungs, like it was mimicking me, watching me breathe, then copying the rhythm just half a second too late. I stopped sleeping, I stopped eating, I stopped writing in the notebook, not because I had nothing to say, but because I no longer trusted my own handwriting. It had changed, became slanted, looping, uneven, familiar, but not mine. I found a sentence scrawled across the margin of one page I didn't remember writing. She's learning to write through you. On the 7th night without sleep, I left the tower. I don't know why. The forest was cold. My boots cracked frozen leaves. But I didn't feel the cold. The moonlight filtered through the trees in a way that made the world look like it was underwater. Everything shimmered and bent as if gravity had forgotten what to hold on to. I heard a voice. It wasn't hers, not the one from the mirror. This one was deeper, quieter, male. "Lisa," it whispered. I turned. Daniel stood between the trees. At least, it looked like him. I ran to him, or maybe I didn't. Maybe I only thought I did. He opened his arms, pulled me close, whispered into my hair, "I found you." And for the first time in days, my body remembered how to feel something other than numb. But then, he touched the jade pendant and hissed. It was quiet, barely audible, but his entire body recoiled from it like it burned him. I stepped back, heart pounding. He smiled. "Sorry," he said, voice too steady. Static shock. We walked back to the tower in silence. I couldn't stop staring at him. His gait was off, too smooth, like he wasn't used to walking in a body that size, like he was piloting it from somewhere else. He asked about the tapes, the notebook. How did he know about the notebook? I hadn't told anyone. Not even in the messages I wrote and never sent. The ones where I tried to say goodbye. The ones I deleted before sending because I wasn't sure who would read them. He knew things he shouldn't, but he smiled the same, laughed in the right places, made the same coffee he used to make, too strong but full of care. I wanted to believe. God, I wanted it so badly. That night, I slept. I don't remember lying down, just the sudden drop into black. When I woke, I was on the floor. The mirror across the room had moved. It was now above the bed. Daniel wasn't there, but written on the wall beside me, in the same looping, jagged scrawl, "He's wearing a Daniel skin." I waited for him to come back. When he did, he brought firewood, whistling like he always used to. Said something about a tree fallen across the old path. I nodded, smiled, pretended. That night while he slept, I turned the camera on him. For 2 hours he didn't move. Then at 3:03 a.m., he opened his eyes, stared directly into the lens, smiled. I destroyed the mirror. I waited until sunrise, then dragged it outside and smashed it against the rocks until it was nothing but glittering dust. I thought it would help. I thought she was trapped in there. That maybe, just maybe, I could end this if I shattered the last doorway. But that night I woke up standing at the shattered pile, and in my hand, a shard. Still reflecting. And in the reflection, her. Something has changed. It's not just me anymore. The tower creaks when I move, even when I'm still. I hear footsteps in the ceiling. The drawers open themselves. The fire never goes out. And Daniel, if it is Daniel, talks to someone when he thinks I'm asleep. Soft murmurs. Not in English. Not in Vietnamese. I recognize the rhythm, though. It's the same cadence my mother used to speak when she looked into mirrors. I think I'm splitting. Sometimes I see myself across the room. Not a reflection. Me, sitting, breathing, watching me back. And when I move toward her, she doesn't move. Sometimes I blink and find myself holding things I didn't remember picking up. Carving symbols into the wall, writing in a language I don't know but recognize in my dreams. I feel full of a presence that expands beneath my skin like roots. She's not whispering anymore, she's humming, low and warm like lullabies turned into static. She says, the mirror wasn't the prison, it was the door. Daniel vanished 2 nights ago. He walked out into the trees and didn't come back. Or maybe he did. Because now there's a man outside the tower, looks just like him. He stands there every night, staring, not knocking, not speaking, just standing. Sometimes he smiles, sometimes he cries, sometimes he doesn't have a face. I haven't eaten in days, but I'm not hungry. I haven't spoken aloud, but I hear replies. I've started seeing Pennhurst again.
Not just in dreams. In the wood grain. In the reflections on the window glass. In the way the room stretches when I walk across it.
She's showing me things, memories that aren't mine, the experiments, the doctors, the other children. I see them in flashes, hooked up to machines, screaming, laughing, their faces turning into mine. I see her sitting in room 11, smiling. Then I see me, strapped to the same chair, also smiling. There's a letter on the desk now, addressed to me. The handwriting is mine. It reads, "It's time to come home." I think I've always been there, still sitting in the chair, still staring at the mirror, still dreaming of a world outside the hospital that doesn't exist. Maybe I never escaped. Maybe I'm still in hallway 11. Maybe this tower, these woods, the man outside, all of it is just another layer, another reflection, another trial. I don't know where I am anymore. The Firewatch tower is gone. Or maybe it's still here, but twisted. The walls creak in patterns. The bed breathes when I sit. The window shows a forest that never moves. And I keep seeing the hallway again. Hallway 11. Even when I close my eyes. Especially when I close my eyes. I tried to leave. I packed the few things I had, camera, tape recorder, the jade pendant, a notebook I no longer trust, and stepped out the front door at dawn, only to find myself standing at the edge of the tree line again. Same fog, same silence, same smell of wet concrete and something old. I turned. The tower was behind me, still standing, still watching, like it never let me leave in the first place. There's a pattern to it now. The days repeat, slightly off, like a record skipping a beat. One morning, the books on the desk are reversed, text mirrored, unreadable unless held to the window. Another morning, the sun rises from the west. Another, I find a second bed beside mine. I haven't opened that one. I think she sleeps there. I hear her footsteps now, not whispers, not thoughts, but physical wood creaking under weight, breathing behind the door. Movement in the reflection that doesn't match my own. She walks like me, breathes like me, but feels different, like an echo-given skin. One night, I dreamt I woke up. Daniel sat beside me holding my hand, but it wasn't warm, and his face was incomplete. His features were soft, out of focus, as if my memory was trying to paint him but couldn't remember the lines. He leaned forward, said, "You're not asleep." Then everything melted. I found a mirror again, not the same one, smaller, in the drawer under the desk. I don't know when I put it there, or if I did. At first I avoided it, but it pulled at me like a magnet under skin. So I looked, and she looked back, but she didn't smile this time. She cried, tears streaked her hollow cheeks, and her lips mouthed something I couldn't hear. I leaned in. She whispered, "Don't let them wake you." I thought I was losing my mind, but now I'm sure it already happened. This repetition, this looping nightmare, isn't a breakdown. It's a structure, a designed construct, like an experiment that never ended, like a simulation. What if hallway 11 was never just a place? What if it's a state of mind? What if I never left? I started seeing numbers, burned into the wall, scratched into my arms while I slept, etched into the steam on the glass. 2711, my mother's number. My number now? I found pages in the notebook that I didn't write. Descriptions of behavior. Subject exhibits recursive dissociation. Self-perception is fragmented. Mirror interaction has exceeded baseline parameters. At the bottom, trial 11, active. I screamed until my throat tore. No one answered. Only the woods replied, groaning, shifting, imitating my voice back at me in slower, deeper tones. One night, I don't know which anymore, I saw her outside. Not in the mirror, not in the dream, outside. She stood between two trees, her hospital gown soaked in mist, her hair falling across her face. But her eyes were mine. She raised a hand, so did I. She turned her palm outward, and I felt heat in my chest. I collapsed. When I woke, my left hand was bleeding, a deep cut, but not random. It was a symbol, the same spiral I had seen carved into the chair in room 11. I'm starting to forget who I am. Or maybe I'm starting to remember what I was always meant to be. The old memories feel like dreams now. My apartment, the channel, Daniel. The only thing that feels real is the hum behind the walls and the whisper beneath the whisper. She says, "You are the door now." Last night the tower blinked. I don't know how else to describe it. The walls flickered, then turned white, sterile. For one moment I saw fluorescent lights above me. A gurney, a hand writing notes in a folder, then it snapped back to wood and darkness. But I swear I saw a camera in the ceiling, and a man behind a two-way mirror, watching me, taking notes. I think this is hallway 11. Everything is. The tower, the woods, the world, all of it. Layer after layer of constructed trials, hallucinated architecture built from broken minds. Maybe my mother never left. Maybe I am her. Maybe I'm the continuation of the experiment. I don't sleep anymore. When I try, I wake up standing, facing the mirror. Always. Even when I've hidden them all, boarded them up, shattered the glass, there's always one left. And she's always there. Sometimes I feel like she's trying to protect me. Other times, I know she's just waiting for the last piece to fall away, for the last thread of me to snap, so she can wear this body completely. The pendant is cracking. Each time I hold it, it's colder, more brittle. I dropped it once, and I swear I heard it whisper when it hit the floor. I got a transmission today. The old radio clicked on by itself. Static first, then a voice.
Patient 2711. Response unstable. Proceeding to trial 12.
I screamed, tore at the radio, but it wouldn't break. If you're reading this, if I ever upload this, know that I tried. I tried to resist, to remain myself. But I think the me you knew died back in that chair, and what's left is just what came through the glass. I stopped asking what was real. That question belongs to people who still have something left to lose. A life, a body, a self. I've let go of all three. Now I only ask one thing. How long have I been here? The sky never changes. The Firewatch Tower remains, but the trees around it have grown faces. Faces I recognize. Daniel, my father, my mother. They speak in unison now, their mouths opening wide, wider than they should. I stopped running from them. Now I just listen, because sometimes they remember things I've forgotten, and sometimes they lie in a way that feels true. The jade pendant shattered 3 nights ago, no warning. I woke up to the sound of something cracking beside my bed, and when I opened my eyes, it was dust, green fragments, a faint scent of iron. I cried, not because I lost it, but because the silence came next. The hum that had always followed me beneath my skin, inside my breath, gone. And that's when I knew she wasn't waiting anymore. She was already inside. The tower melted at 3 a.m. Not burned, not collapsed, melted. The walls dissolved like wax under heat, revealing what was always behind them. Metal, cables, observation windows, monitors. They had been watching me the whole time. Doctors in long coats scribbled on clipboards. One of them looked like Edgar. Another wore Daniel's face, but it flickered, changing between versions I had forgotten, versions that never existed. One leaned forward, pressed a button. The world turned black. I woke strapped to the chair again. Room 11, or maybe room 1, or maybe it had never changed. The two-way mirror was in front of me. On the other side, myself. But not as I am now. Younger, prettier, whole. She smiled.
This is what they wanted, Lisa. A perfect container. You just had to let go. Flashes. I saw my mother, in the same chair, years ago, wearing the same pendant, screaming, her mind tearing itself apart as machines around her hummed. A voice over a speaker calmly narrating emotional spikes, dissociative fractures, mirror synchronization. I saw her look up, saw her mouth my name, now in panic, but in apology. I tried to keep you separate, she whispered, but you were born in the glass. Everything made sense. Too much sense. That's how I knew it was a lie, the most perfect lie, that I had never been real.
But I was a construct, born from trauma, a mental fragment nurtured by the Pennhurst experiments, that my memories were scripted, that every time I blinked, someone rewrote the next page, that the me I thought I was, YouTuber, daughter, seeker, was just a skin grown over the thing inside, that she was the real one all along.
But I don't believe it, because when I screamed, it echoed. Because when I cried, I tasted salt. Because when I looked at the version of myself smiling behind the glass, she flinched. And that meant she feared me.
The chair snapped open. I stood. The room around me vibrated, collapsing and reforming into infinite versions of itself. An endless mirror maze of who I could be, who I was, who they wanted me to become. I chose none of them. I ran. Hallways twisted, time staggered. I saw other versions of me. Laughing, crying, asleep, awake. In one I wore my mother's face. In another I had no mouth. In another I was strapped to a bed, while others pointed at me through a mirror, arguing whether I was salvageable. I kept running until silence. A door. On of a single phrase, etched in deep red. Trial complete. I opened it. The world outside was ordinary. Gray sky, cracked road, a city skyline in the distance. I stepped out barefoot, the air cold on my skin. Cars passed, people stared, confused. Someone called the police. They wrapped me in a blanket. They asked me questions I couldn't answer. They said I'd been missing for 3 years. Now I'm sitting in a hospital, a real one. White walls, real people. They don't believe my story. They say I've suffered from prolonged psychosis, dissociation, fugue states, that Pennhurst is just a ruin, that there was no hallway to 11, that the pendant was ornamental, that my mother never existed in any patient file. They smile kindly, but they don't know what I know. They don't see what I still see, in reflections, in corners, in my dreams, because she's still here. She walks with me now, sits beside me, whispers through the plastic curtain.
They think you're cured, but we never left. This is just the next hallway.
And every night at 3 a.m., the room flickers, the lights hum, and in the mirror at the end of the bed, she smiles.
This story was shared by a real eyewitness. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing it to Spooky Alley. If you enjoyed it, leave a comment below and support us on this journey ahead. See you next time.